to another episode of Lie, Cheat, and Steal, the podcast about liars, frauds, thieves, and bullshitters. I'm your host, Pat Soroyce. I just want to remind you we are a bi-monthly podcast, and we're available on Stitcher, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. And if you haven't already, be sure to give us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to us on. And leave a short review if you could. That's what helps us out the most. It helps us get us to the top of the heap in iTunes. One of the easiest ways to help the show. We also do have 2 more episodes every month on our Patreon, so if you like what you hear, visit patreon.com/lies, cheat, and steal to sign up for 2 more scam stories every month, as well as access to our entire back catalog and our Discord. That being said, I'm sitting here hanging out with my co-host, Kath Barbadoro. Kath, how you doing?
Hi, Pat. I'm good. I'm doing all right. I was having a really annoying day, but we just recorded our most recent Patreon episode, and it was so much fun. I feel like I feel a little better. So
that's what's up, man. Yeah. You guys, you're gonna want this is better than therapy. Please sign up for our Patreon.
please allow us to continue doing it. We really appreciate it. But yeah,
that's what's up. I'm glad you're in a better mood. I know we were discussing the merits of an action-packed vacation versus one where you just have time to yourself.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine, you had more of an action-packed week in Texas. So I can imagine getting back and just kind of not having the patience for a city like New York.
I just have been kind of grumpy today. I've just had a bunch of minor inconveniences strung together. But we were just talking. I'm going to the gym after this. It'll be all right. I'll live.
Hell yeah.
I'll survive.
Yeah, man. I've been in the gym lately, and it is crazy, the amount of stress. I still be stressed out, but how a week where, I say, if I'm not working out and I'm not keeping a good eating schedule or whatever, and just life's little stresses, oh, this bill is due, I'm waiting on this check to clear, whatever the case may be. How impending and stressful that feels, versus that I've been getting up and working out, running a little bit, and it's okay, I still gotta take care of that, but it's not breathing down my neck and just giving me extreme anxiety how it would be if I wasn't doing that,
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the reason I started working out on a more consistent basis. I guess about 4 years ago now, I started going to the gym regularly, and it was mainly to help my anxiety and my sleep. That was the big thing. It wasn't so much for my physical health or anything. I didn't feel like I had any issues in that regard, but it just makes me sleep so much better, and it's a really good stress reliever. It is very helpful. I go kind of in and out with it sometimes, but when I can keep up the momentum of it, it is very helpful. I feel like this is kind of related to what we're talking about today, because we're going to talk about good habits versus bad habits. Okay. That's
all right. We have I'll hear both sides.
I mean, look, you got to have a little bit of both. It's very important to have a healthy balance of virtue and vice in your life. I truly believe that. But yeah, this what we're going to talk about today is a bit of a cautionary tale about the vice side of things.
Ooh, okay.
We are going to talk...
I take no caution, so try me. Let's do this.
Well, you may have heard of this. We're going to talk about... This is a scam from one of my favorite genres of scam, which is the classic literary scam. I've done many of these.
Yes.
This is a similar one. Today we're going to be talking about a little book from the 1970s called Go Ask Alice. Do you know about this book?
That sounds familiar, but then again, it's 3 words that I hear relatively often, so that's what I'm hearing.
Fairly common words. This is a sort of staple of your high school library. Probably had a copy of this.
Okay.
It has a pretty sort of lurid history that we're going to talk about today. So basically, Go Ask Alice is a book that was published in 1971. Initially it said it was, the author listed on the cover was anonymous, but it detailed this lurid, story that was purported by, an epigraph on the inside to be a true real life diary of a 15-year-old girl and her, downward spiral into drugs and vice and sex and ultimately death It's a pretty wild book. Yeah. So
it's wild. I don't normally equate those things, but okay.
Yeah. So it's basically just like an episode of Intervention, you know, like that's kind of the
Nice.
vibe. Like the first act of the show Intervention is kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm sure this has been said before, but it's one of the first things I noticed when I watched that show. I was like, so you're telling me I can just sit in a car with drugs as long as I got a camera?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Why are none of these people getting in trouble? Like,
yeah. Hold on. So I just got to carry I just got to go around with a documentary film crew.
I can do whatever.
And I can shoot up heroin
Yep.
in a Publix parking lot. All right, good to know.
Really useful info.
Yeah, strange show.
But yeah, so this book, it was like a huge sensation. So within the first couple years it was published, it sold 3 million copies. It was eventually adapted into a stage play and a TV movie starring William Shatner.
Go Ask Alice, starring William Shatner.
As Alice.
Yeah, the man's got range, is what I mean to say.
Well, so the thing is, like, the book is called Go Ask Alice. Alice is not the name of the narrator. The narrator is anonymous. The name it's named because of the Jefferson Airplane song White Rabbit, where they say, you know, it's about drugs. And this is like a classic. So it was the early 70s. So it was like basically hippie scare propaganda. It was like, do not let your kids become hippies. So that's why it was called Go Ask Alice.
Did we talk about this on a previous episode about how every person I've ever met that's outwardly identified as a hippie turns out to be a fucking scumbag?
Yeah, I don't know if that was on the episode that we didn't release or not, but we have talked about that recently. About it's not an indicator of like good politics or anything.
No, it's always like I've never had a good experience.
But yeah, like in the late 60s, it pretty much just meant you wanted to, like, you know, listen to jam bands and do drugs, and like, you know, maybe you were against the Vietnam War. I feel like it did have a little bit more of a political bent back then. It wasn't just like going to Fish concerts, but that I mean, this story of this girl is like she's in it for the party. She's in it for the drugs.
Yeah.
But
hell yeah, fuck the message.
So the book is basically like the first part of it, nothing really happens in it. It sort of just establishes that she's like kind of your average middle American, middle class Christian teenager, like from a good family. Her mom is a stay-at-home mom. But then it kind of takes a little bit of a turn. Her father has to move their family for work. She moves to another city, in another state, so like far from her friends, and she has a tough time adjusting to the new environment. She has some younger siblings. They seem to, you know, be dealing with this much better. So she's like a little bit angsty. She's mad that her parents made her move, and then she goes to a party where she takes some LSD for the first time. This is her first experience with drugs. She drinks...
Best time to do it. Around a bunch of strangers at a house you've never been to before.
Yeah, when you're 15 in high school and like really self-conscious. Yeah. That's a good time to do it. So she drinks a Coke that has been spiked with LSD, and she loves it. She writes in her diary... Dear Diary, I don't know whether I should be ashamed or elated. I only know that last night I had the most incredible experience of my life. She says that she realizes the things she heard about LSD were obviously written by uninformed, ignorant people like my parents, who obviously don't know what they're talking about. So she is on the hippie train, you know? Yeah.
What else have they been lying about, Alice?
Exactly.
Or whatever your name is.
Well, the thing that's sort of interesting in this book too is like it posits LSD as the gateway drug, which is interesting because like that is so not how these stories get told later. But basically, she like loves acid, and then she starts smoking weed. She starts taking pills. She shoots speed, like things.
That's not. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but that's rare that it goes like acid to weed into pills into shooting up.
Right, and also like people who do psychedelics, I feel like are really not at risk of like other habit forming drugs. You know what I mean?
Not a big overlap in those scenes.
Yeah, I mean, like, people who do other types of drugs will also do psychedelics, but I feel like people who are really into psychedelics, like, that's often kind of their only thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I know a lot of people who, like, don't even drink and, like, take acid every weekend. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's a weird...
Yeah, that's always funny to me, the people who don't do any drugs or really party at all. And like a comedian buddy of ours that throws big parties does that. Doesn't drink, doesn't touch drugs, but once a year just has like an absolute fucking blowout.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of hallucinogens. And, you know,
like we said, you got to have a balance of good habits and bad habits.
Yeah.
It's important. Yep. So however you want to do it, I guess. However you want to do that calculus. But, you know, she's loving the drugs. She's having a great time, but they make her life, you know, pretty complicated. She starts hooking up with her dealer. She has sex. She's worried she's pregnant. Then she finds out that her dealer is sheeting on her with his roommate, who is a man. So we have, you know, serious sin going on. All the bad things. Yeah, exactly. Some terrible sin going on.
Yeah. I love just like the idea, the belief that like drugs and shit would just lead. It's like, I mean, like if you're gay, you're gay, but like I don't know, like the idea that you get into being gay, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Like
I mean, I feel like it's very of its time, you know. It's like this hippie free love thing where it's like, oh my god, her drug dealer is sleeping with men too and women. Yeah. Like, what is this lawless society? Like,
does he hold nothing sacred?
Right. Exactly. Which is just very funny because it's like, I mean, if you think that, it's like, well then, is the only thing keeping you from doing that you think it's bad? Like, why are you gay? Like, what's going on? Yeah. It's just a weird...
I've grown up in a Baptist church. I have sat there in a little congregation while I've heard a ton of Christian adults like admit to me like, yeah, you know, like I was living in sin. I was having same-sex relationships. That comes up. Like, I'm not saying all the time, but, like, it gets thrown out there on occasion, and they'll have people who are like, yeah, I used to be, my life was crazy. I was taking acid. I was having sex with men. And now they're like, I'm reformed now. And it's like, when you're a kid, it's like you're like, I don't know, this is what the adult's telling me. I'm told these things are bad, so okay. When you get older, you're like, that is just a deeply closeted gay man. Like,
right. It's one thing to, like, stop taking drugs. It's another thing to change the gender you're sexually attracted to. That's, like, a pretty serious...
Yeah, and then go on a speaking tour like throughout the South, like talking about how you don't want to have sex with dudes at all. Like, I'm totally over it.
There's a good Mr. Show sketch about that, about like a reformed gay guy who keeps relapsing. And it just ends where they're like, and he has another relapse planned for spring break. It's very funny.
Mr. Show.
Very good. But yeah, so after she realizes her dealer is cheating on her, she drops out and runs away to San Francisco. So she's like 16 at this point.
Can it get any worse?
Right? Going to San Francisco, just... Yeah.
She's taking trips to San Fran. She's wearing beads.
Right. Things genuinely do get very bad. It gets real dark. She turns to prostitution. She's gang raped. She, her grandparents die. That sends her into like a big spiral. She ends up getting arrested, and then she like has acid flashbacks. It's like everything. And she does, after she gets arrested, she goes to rehab, and then she does get sober with the help of a priest, but then she relapses again. She ends up in a mental institution. It's like, it's everything. So finally at the end of the book, she, she's been institutionalized, and that has sort of helped her. And she's like getting ready to give sobriety like a real try. And the diary ends with her saying like she's kicked all her bad habits. She finally needs to stop the last of her bad habits, which is keeping the diary. And that's the last entry. But then
very, very YA write out.
Absolutely. But here's the twist. The epilogue of the book says, quote, "The subject of this book died 3 weeks after her decision not to keep another diary. Her parents came home from a movie and found her dead. They called the police and the hospital, but there was nothing anyone could do." So it's unclear whether this was a suicide, whether this was an unintentional overdose. But yeah, that's the book.
Damn.
Pretty bleak stuff. you know?
Yeah, right? Well, shit, that's the episode, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
And this book is, like, very, like, I don't think I read this as a kid, but, like, I knew about this book. And, like, I knew
looked
people
up the...
who read it.
Yeah, I looked at the cover, and I saw the cover, and I was like, oh, I've seen that. Like, as you said, it was a mainstay in high school libraries.
Yes, exactly. And the covers were kind of a big part of its appeal. Like, people would pick it up because they had a bunch of different covers of, like, a very sullen-looking teenage girl, like
somebody in high school was like, hey, that I feel like that.
Right. A bunch of drugs, like, just, they were very, very sort of lurid as this goes. And then also, because it's, like, it's very graphic, it's, like, it's full of profanity, it's full of, these, like, very graphic descriptions of, like, sex and violence and drug use. So teenagers were kind of into it because it's, like, kind of illicit, if you're, like, a young teenager.
It's like an accidentally cool book.
Right. Like, you get to read about this stuff that's, like, bad because it's in the context of, like, don't do this. You know what I mean? So
we had to do, like, an anti-smoking thing one time, and, like, me and this girl in class that we were in 9th grade, we both smoked cigarettes, and we were, like, they had this thing, it was, like, there's, like, multiple choice questions, like, what's the worst part of smoking? It was, like, smelling like smoke, your parents hating you, or the soggy wet tip when your friend passes it to you, or all of the above. And we chose the soggy wet tip things. They were like, no, the answer was all of the above. I was like, oh yeah, I guess those things are bad.
I guess those things are also bad, but really I don't want to suck on a soggy cigarette.
Yeah, that's the real deal breaker.
That's what the real smokers will tell you is the worst part.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was totally like that kind of dare shit where you're like, you're fascinated by this stuff, and it's like, ooh, I get to, like, kind of vicariously experience this, like, bad behavior in this book. And it was also really helped by the fact that this book was banned very often in the 70s because of all of these, like, very graphic depictions of all this stuff. So that, of course, only increased its popularity. Like, teenagers were, like, more into it. And like, there are a lot of libraries and, like, young adult sort of centric, like, places where they have lists of banned books, and it's like, here are the books they don't want you to read, to, like, try to incite.
Why would you even put the name on the paper?
Well, it's to try to get teenagers to read more. It's like, you get to be bad. I have
seen that one. Yeah.
Like, you get to be, like, transgressive. So
yeah, I have seen that approach. I thought you were talking literally. They were just like, hey, don't read these books, right? Like, I was like, yeah, that's the surefire way to get them read. But I guess they know that and embrace it.
That's what they're trying to do. Yeah. So that, like, Go Ask Alice had this, like, enduring popularity, and it sort of, like, came from both sides and also had sort of objectors of both sides because, like, it's basically like exploitation fiction, it's like, you're reading it for kind of the lurid stuff, and then there's this moral tacked onto the end to try to make you feel bad for, like, the reason you're actually reading it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, what a healthy way to go about that.
Yeah, well, when we get into how this book was produced, I feel like you'll start to understand the psychology of these types of people who are into this kind of stuff. So yeah, we're going to talk about who wrote this book, who was Alice, I guess you could say. So this book was sold to a publisher by a woman named Beatrice Sparks. So that is the copyright holder of the book, as well as a bunch of other books that we're going to talk about. But according to Beatrice, she found a real teenager's diary and then edited and sort of assembled it into a narrative, and then sold it to a publisher. That was her story, but she always maintained there was, like, a real girl whose diary this was. And in some versions she got it from the girl, in some versions she got it from the girl's parents, but she, like, had property of this book, edited it, and then sold it to a publisher. So Beatrice Sparks, how did she get in possession of this book? What is her deal? Let me tell you. She was a Mormon housewife. I feel like the fact that she is Mormon really puts a lot of pieces into place for me when I think about the narrative of this book.
But Mormon housewives have really had an outsized impact on fiction.
Yeah, that is really true when you think about it. Especially like pulpy fiction like this, like
like lurid, like when
steamy
just
stuff,
like lurid tales, steamy sexual shit. Yeah, it's man, it's almost like I don't know, something's going on over there. I'd say.
I think so. But yeah, so Beatrice Sparks had a background in writing and speaking. She had written a book prior to this called The Key to Happiness, which was a book of advice on, quote, grooming, comportment, voice, and self-discipline for high school and college-age girls. So again, really putting the pieces into place is like, she tried to tell girls how to act. That didn't work. So she was like, let's tell girls how not to act. Maybe that'll work.
Oh, shit. I mean, you gotta admire somebody's ability to stick and move. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it was like she just kept throwing out that same jab where she was like, no, don't do this. Throwing out like the chick tracks or whatever.
Yeah.
You know? Like to say, don't do this. She literally was like, oh, that didn't work. Okay, let's flip the script. And get inside. I mean, the motives are shitty, but I got to appreciate the hustle.
Well, and she was a hustler, which we'll get into. But yeah, so she wrote this book called The Key to Happiness. It wasn't super successful, but she did offer this weekly seminar at Brigham Young University, which is the Mormon university in Utah. She would give a class for like a women's etiquette class. Talking about this stuff. So at this point, she was calling herself a lecturer. She later said that she had a PhD. Sometimes she'd say it was in psychiatry or psychology. Sometimes she'd say human behavior. She presented herself as a therapist, a counselor, a social worker, or even an adolescent psychologist. And
God, this woman is ahead of her time. I feel like the whole like life coach / Instagram influence. It feels like she was really tapping into something before it was there.
Well, it's interesting you say that because she, before she sold Go Ask Alice, she was involved in a multi-level marketing scheme. So like, you are absolutely right that this is a hustler. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this is a hustler, and yeah. So she claimed all these credentials, but people who research this book and this story, they can't find any record that she ever got a PhD, even though, she put it on her book jackets and stuff, but like, no one has any record of that. So yeah, she was born in Idaho, and she met this rich Mormon guy out on the West Coast, and he had oil money, so he was like a big oil investor.
Ooh.
They lived in LA until their son went away to college, and since they were Mormon, he went to BYU, and at that point, the family relocated to Provo, Utah. So
okay, I just drove through that whole part of the country. Drove through Salt Lake, man.
It's very beautiful.
That temple is crazy looking.
It sucks that we gave such a beautiful part of the country to Mormons. We really fucked up. We should have given them a worse part of the country because it is so nice there.
Yeah, I mean, I was just out there at every turn of the highway, just like this new thing comes into view, and you're like, everything is so much more beautiful than Texas, and I love Texas. That's a big thing for me to say that.
Yeah.
But God, that part of the country is it's insane.
Yeah, it's wonderful out there. But yeah, it is also like the capital of multi-level marketing and Ponzi schemes. So we've talked about that before.
I hate to give it, but we talked about that before. How you were saying how like you mentioned it the last time we talked about, I think LuLaRoe, about how like there's this importance of being able to bring money in without actually having a job.
Yeah, we talked about it with Young Living too, the essential oil company. It's because like women are not expected to work, but or they're expected not to work. They like kind of aren't supposed to. But it's like this idea that you can make money like with your community, like selling to other women in your community, and you can do it from home, and it's it's sort of tailor-made to Mormon stuff.
Yeah. At that point, aren't all you're doing is just shifting around like each other's husband's money?
Pretty much.
Like not to say that like I'm not saying it's their husband's money, but it's like strictly by the rules of that game. It's their husband's money.
Yeah. But yeah, so the multi-level marketing scheme that Sparks was involved in was this thing where like it was like a direct sales thing where it was called the Family Achievement Institute, and it was these like vinyl, because it's from like way back in the day, like we don't have cassettes even yet, we have vinyl. these essays that were read by people like Pat Boone and Art Linkletter, who we're going to talk about in a minute. And it was basically like self-help stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So she was involved because she would write essays for it. And then Pat Boone and Art Linkletter and people like that would read them. So again, this sort of like how-to like stuff, you know? So she's doing that, and then people would like go do direct sales to try to sell these like, you know, self-help things. She didn't do it for very long, but she got connected with this guy, Art Linkletter, and that's what led to Go Ask Alice. So Art Linkletter was famous for hosting the original version of that show, Kids Say the Darndest Things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so he was like a personality, like a game show host type guy.
I know Pat Boone. I know I'd heard Art Linkletter before, but I did not know that's where he was from.
Yeah. So, like, he was involved in this Family Achievement Institute, as was she. They reconnected a few years later because Art Linkletter's daughter committed suicide, and Art Linkletter blamed it on LSD. And he started this big anti-drug campaign against LSD, which were like, that was like such a hot button issue at the time of like, kids are taking LSD and jumping out of windows and stuff, like that kind of thing.
There was a lot of the big push in that early anti-drug shit was celebrities who lost kids. It was Carol O'Connor did that shit too.
Yeah. There was like a whole cadre of them. And so that was like Art Linkletter's big crusade, and he would go like testify in front of Congress and stuff. Like, this was sort of the birth of the war on drugs. And and this kind of
Nancy Reagan shit.
Exactly, like right before all that. And you know, he was really involved in that, and Sparks had been volunteering at a local hospital where she was getting, you know, these like troubled teens would come in, and so she was like really interested in this stuff, and she was writing this manuscript. The manuscript at that point was called Buried Alive, The Diary of an Anonymous Teenager. And she gave it to Linkletter to be like, can you sell this? You know, like, I think this is a really serious issue and we have to get the word out. So that is the book that becomes Go Ask Alice. So Linkletter's agency sells the book to a publisher, and Sparks initially, she wanted it to appear under her name. But the publishing house was like, this is going to be a lot more powerful if we present it as real, which, you know,
we've seen that before.
Right. So, so they took her name off it, and she was disappointed, but she was also just like, I get it. Let's do that. And she is kind of like cagey about it. Like, she says it's based on a real person, but it's like, we're going to get into it. She ended up writing a bunch of these types of books, and she...
It's a whole extended universe of made-up teens.
Yeah, and she purports to not have written them, but she's the copyright holder on all of them. So it's like, yeah, bitch, you wrote these. Like, you made this up.
Yeah, it's like, did you write? And she's like, no, I didn't write. Oh, so you stole them? You're like, why did I didn't steal them? You're asking too many goddamn questions.
But yeah, so the publishing house changed the name to Go Ask Alice, which is like a very topical reference at the time to the hippies. And, you know, it's what all the Mormon parents are afraid of, is like that these kids are going to go off to San Francisco and, you know, stop calling them and become prostitutes or whatever. So, like, in addition to this book being marketed toward young adults, it's also marketed by Art Linkletter to all these like lobbying groups, you know, like, because it's such a message book. It's like they're trying to get the teenagers to read it because it's like, you know, seamy and lurid. And then Art Linkletter is talking to like the Drug Manufacturers Association to be like, we need really strict laws about drugs because it's corrupting our youth, you know? So Go Ask Alice, immediately a runaway success. Beatrice Sparks is kind of bummed because she can't really tell anybody she wrote it. She ends up sort of coming out as like the person who compiled it and like found the diary or like talked to the parents. But so she ends up writing a book of like similar stories but under her own name, where she's like, I talked to these kids and now I'm writing down their stories. And surprise, surprise, the prose sounds exactly like the prose in Go Ask Alice. It's like completely the same.
That's just the voice of teenage diarists.
Yeah, man.
That's what that's how they talk. But do you think that there's like I feel like there's like an unhealthy national obsession that crops up like once a generation about like the sex lives of teenagers.
Yeah, exactly. That is so much of what this is. It's just like teenager exploitation. Like
because I remember like watching the things of like on like when I was a teenager and watching like daytime TV or talk shows and shit, and it would have these things like, oh, lipstick parties. Everybody's seeing how far they can make lipstick. I'm like, dude, trust me. If there was a party where everybody's just openly getting their dick sucked, like in high school, like I would have at least heard about it.
Yeah.
Not saying I would have been invited, but I would have heard about that place.
Yeah, no, there's always something like that. There's like the rainbow like silly bands and stuff. Like there's always some
Oh yeah, I remember the silly bands and it was like
Yeah,
it was, oh no, they're wearing them because it's all about something like how many people they fucked or some shit like that.
It was like sex merit badges basically. It was like you'd get a color for something that you did with the guy or whatever. It's
oh my god.
None of that is real. Like teenagers are so like yes, teenagers are horny, but they're also so afraid of each other. Like
yeah.
I really, it beggars belief that any of this stuff is happening because teenagers are so freaked out by the opposite sex and by their hormones and like, they're not having like open orgies. Like
that's exactly. There was, I watched like Euphoria. I didn't watch Euphoria season 1, but I saw all and I watched season 2.
You watched it because Martha was on it, right?
Yeah, our good friend Martha's in there. So yeah, she's nominated for a fucking Emmy. That's so tight.
Yeah, man. Shout out to our lovely friend Martha Kelly, who is now Emmy nominated.
Yeah,
she is great. She's so terrifying.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, so I watched that, but I remember watching the previews for the first one, and it was just like HBO, like the show was basically like teens who fuck, but they're actually real good at it. And it was just like, it was a very odd angle. It was like, these kids are just fucking, but not like in the awkward, weird way that kids fuck, but they're laying it down out there. It was such a weird narrative that I got from, obviously, the show's about more, but.
Yeah, but it is it's that same like teen exploitation thing. It's like, when the parents are gone, like what happens? And it turns out what happens is things that adults are horny about, which is so gross and creepy and
it's
weird.
Always a reflection of all the shit. It's like, they're just essentially you're just redescribing the key parties you and all your neighbors went to in the fucking 70s. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, except with like children, which is insane.
Yeah. You were the one in the room that was like, man, what if kids were doing this, right? Right, guys? Hey, where's everybody going?
It's a really bizarre like cultural fixation. I mean, I guess it's also just like, and I feel like it makes sense that it was like Mormons and stuff because people who are like in that sect of Christianity are like, they're obsessed with virginity and like purity and all of the stuff that like the reverse side of it is how you get Go Ask Alice and how you get like fucking 50 Shades of Grey and like all of this stuff comes from the same place. And it's like a very weird, warped sexuality, not in the ways that they think it is, like warped in a different, more fucked up way, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. If anybody out there's a Google like rabbit hole or let's look up obscure shit, there's a Christian book called Teens Fight, and that's the big letter, and then under it, Adult Corruption. And it's written by like a 78-year-old guy, and it's about like teenagers who are like, essentially the story is like, yeah, these teens are bad, but they're bad because they're watching us. And it's about like, and it's so, like me and my friend, his mom bought it, and his mom she was very Christian, but she was pretty cool. She was like, this is a bad book. She's like, this book is so bad. And so me and my friend just got fucking stoned and would read it and just die laughing. So look, I forget, it's called Teens Fight, Adult Corruption. And it's one of those just geeked out, smoke a joint and just laugh at like the dumbest concepts and horrible prose.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing that's interesting about Go Ask Alice is that like it was successful with teenagers, which is like kind of weird to think about when you think about who it was written by and like why it was written. But like people were really into it. This book is like an enduring thing. It's like still around, I think it is people are a little savvier now, and I think roll their eyes at it a little bit, but it has like sort of endured as like a mythic story, you know?
I'm still seeing reprints of it here, and and also this lady lived to be very old.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about some of the other stuff she wrote that I feel like is arguably like more egregious. Like, I feel like if it were just Go Ask Alice, I probably wouldn't be doing this episode, as sort of interesting as it is, but she like really made a career out of basically doing this exact thing. And the most sort of egregious example was one that came a couple years after. So as I said, she tried publishing some stuff under her own name in this sort of vein, like about this stuff, and it didn't go over quite as well. Like, I think she realized, like, okay, I need the intrigue of like, this is a real diary, like that.
Yeah.
Because people are perverts and they want to read about like a 16-year-old doing this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can I just read more cautionary tales about what them girls are getting into? Yeah. You got any more of those laying around?
Well, in the one I'm about to talk about, she goes in a different direction with it, but it's the same sort of exploitation stuff. Her next book, after she publishes this book under her own name called Voices, is this book called Jay's Journal. And Jay is a 16-year-old who, according to Sparks, his mother got in touch with her after the success of Go Ask Alice. She read an article about her, and she called to ask if Sparks might help her because her son had committed suicide and had left a journal. And was like, I think this could really help people, you know, like, I saw what you did with Go Ask Alice, like, maybe we can publish this. And the story is, the real story is really sad, and the fake story is really funny. So I'm trying to like figure out how to talk about both. So basically, Jay, unlike Alice, there is documented evidence that Jay was a real person. So Jay was actually this guy named Alden Barrett, who was a very, you know, intelligent, sensitive 16-year-old who committed suicide in the early 70s. And Jay's journal is very different. So I guess I'll give the real. So his brother ended up writing a book a few years later after Jay's journal came out, and described his brother as you know, this like really smart. He was really into poetry, but he had depression, and you know, he eventually sort of succumbed and lost his battle with it. But he wasn't like a super rebellious kid. His main form of rebellion was like, he was opposed to the Vietnam War. Like, you know, he didn't really fit in necessarily with his, you know, his family was Mormon. Again, his family was Mormon.
Can you believe that Baird boy doesn't support what we're doing in Vietnam?
Yeah.
Crazy, you know?
He's just like he like smoked weed, and he like learned about Hinduism and played with a Ouija board. But he wasn't like a goth. Like, he wasn't a bad kid. He was just like a, you know, kind of sensitive in his family of Mormons. But of course, the book, because it was written with his Mormon, you know, his Mormon mom gives it to Beatrice Sparks. The book ends up being full on satanic panic shit. So that's what ends up being hilarious to me. So so Jay's journal is, it takes the same sort of structure as Go Ask Alice, but instead of being focused on drugs and prostitution, it's focused on drugs and Satan worship. So
okay, all right. So it's a little more of a light romp.
yeah.
That's man, yeah. That's it. It's so crazy to look at that in retrospect. The Satanic Panic. You're like, man, those guys are goofy, but like, it nothing to justify any of their behavior, but it's just crazy to think they really believe that shit. They work 100% like, yo, this is happening in our backyard, and it was a national hallucination.
I mean,
it's crazy to wrap your head around.
It's back, so it's happening again. No, it's like we're
oh god,
that all this groomer shit is Satanic Panic all over again, 100%.
Yeah.
Like. And our brains are broken. We're having a mass societal hallucination. It's really bad. So yeah. Not one thing can be broadcast on TV without
so many people I know on Facebook that are like, man, did you guys see all the 6-pointed stars in there? It's just like, man, just stop. Go outside, please.
Go outside, please. But yeah, so Jay's journal, according to the story in Jay's journal, which, by the way, this guy's family, Alden's family, said she used maybe like a tenth of his actual diary entries and then fabricated the rest of them.
Did the family, even though there's the unifying bond of them being Mormon, was the family like, hey, what the hell?
The mom ended up upset. His brother ended up really upset. Because his brother was like, my brother was not into the occult or whatever. And like the amount of stuff she's describing, it truly is, she says, after being sent to reform school, he learned to levitate objects, developed ESP, attended midnight orgies, and was possessed by a demon named Raoul. So...
What? You trying to get me to fucking sign up?
Yeah.
That sounds like
sounds pretty fucking
this guy got
cool,
superpowers, and he was getting his dick sucked, and all of a sudden, hold on, he had to hang out with a guy named Raoul. I bust my ass. I don't have one friend named Raoul. This is insane. That's just like the whole like superpowers. Like that's not gonna get me to stay away from this shit. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, again, it's like this weird dark Mormon or like super Christian fascination with like the dark side is like.
Yeah.
They're like really perverted about all this stuff.
Yeah. They got to make it seem like there's power there, or else
Satan's real.
It's like,
Satan's real.
Yeah.
And he can influence you. Yeah.
So how come God doesn't have me out here lifting shit up in my mind?
Exactly.
And stuff? You know what I'm saying? It just
Give
feels
me
like
ESP, Jesus.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I bet a good way to fight Satan this would be if I could shoot fucking lasers out of my hands.
Right.
You know, like I bet that would help me take out a few.
You gotta work on your marketing. It's really like you need to present me a more compelling alternative.
Yeah. And if I could go to a couple midnight orgies, I think I just think a little clearer about all this shit. Come on, God, goddamn, it's tough as shit down here, bro.
But yeah, so she depicted this whole scene of like a satanic wedding that like. So this is like the brother. So it says like according to her, the wedding had a demonic mass featuring black candles, bloodletting, and a kitten sacrifice. But in reality, his brother said it was a quiet, unofficial ceremony between Alden and his high school girlfriend. So like really.
Oh, that's great. And also he's in Utah. Like where. Like I mean I just can't imagine like if you're gonna tell me about Satanists, it's like they got to be out of state because it's Utah. He's not sacrificing demons in where is he from? Point Pleasant, Utah, or Pleasant Grove, Utah.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. That's the other. It's like when 9/11 happened and like they put a security guard at the library. It's like I don't think they're coming here next, dude.
Right.
Like, it's all very strange.
This
you think
is last on their
that
list.
would be happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think is like really egregious and why I'm just like fuck this lady, she published his real suicide note, but prefaces it with a bunch of fake entries about Raoul the demon. It's like, you motherfucker, like you took this poor suffering boy's like final words to his family, which are like very moving and sad.
Yeah.
And then made it about a demon you made up. Like it's just so gross.
Yeah. If hell is real and that doesn't send you there, but having fucking superpowers does, you know what I'm saying? Like that is an injustice on a cosmic level, and it's just proof that evil people live forever. Like that's evil person shit. And this lady was like 96 when she died. Like
she was old, and she also wrote so many of these fucking books. So like
I'm going through it. She's a whole extended universe of troubled tales.
Right, and they're all like it's like there's one about AIDS, and there's one about eating disorders, and there's one about gangs, and like there's just
nobody's keeping a gang diary, man.
Yeah. And it's just like, she sort of realized that this was like a market, and I feel like after Go Ask Alice, I think writing the Satan one, I think people were like, all right, lady, like this is, we're not going to take this one as seriously, but
I think that's what happens when you have like a Christian breakout hit. it captivates everybody for a long time, and they got to keep replicating that success. And then like the returns, then it's just back to the standard Christian audience. I've noticed with that.
Yeah, that is true.
It's like it. I call it the Linsanity effect. So like everybody just, we're like, oh shit, look at this Christian adjacent thing that's happening right now. That's pretty cool. And then like when the next edition is, or when it continues, then it's just for the fans.
I feel like it's a thing where it's like, like when like Creed or whatever like crosses over into the mainstream and people are like, hey, this is pretty good. Wait a minute, is this about Jesus? And then they like kind of lose interest. Like,
dude, man, it's, like I've talked about it before, but like our church was real big in the youth group on secular music, and I came out when Creed was out. And I was like, oh, I can listen.
This one's allowed, yeah.
Yeah, it's got to do with it. Like POD came out, and that was the game changers. I loved rap rock.
Yeah.
And POD came out, I was like, these dudes are Christian, and it like, yeah, it's just kind of funny. Because looking back, it's like, yeah, they're not that good. Also, POD not that Christian. Like,
yeah, kind of neither.
They're Christian enough, but yeah.
Nominally. But yeah, I feel like it's Maria Bamford has an old joke about that, about like them trying to trick you into going to church. We're like, wait a minute, is this church? Like, I think this is church. I feel like that's kind of the Go Ask Alice phenomenon. But that book has stayed like in the zeitgeist, even so. But yeah, she had a long career writing these books. It was sort of like known-ish that she, like, it's so weird because it's like, obviously, if you look at her, like, series of books, she said she was a child psychologist and these were like all case studies and stuff, but it really like beggars belief. I feel like if you look at all of these laid out, it's like, well, of course she was kind of making stuff up, but she never really faced any consequences for it. Like there was never any big expose or anything. It just kind of was like, well, some lady just wrote this, right? Like,
yeah.
It's kind of weird to me. So there's this new book that came out called Unmask Alice, where this guy, let me see what his name is. I wrote it down. Rick Emerson wrote this new book about Go Ask Alice and kind of delving more into Beatrice Sparks's life and stuff. But it's not like this is like brand new information. It's not like a bombshell. Yeah. It's like, no, this woman is just like a known kind of like liar in order to get teenagers to not be drug abusing Satanists. And it kind of worked for a while. And then, she lived to be 1,000,000 years old. She published her last book in 2012 and she died in 2012. So like she was doing it right up until, so some fucking 90-something-year-old is writing books about what it's like to be a teenager. So
and this is a story about a young girl who was sending pictures of her genitals and all the things that came after that. Like, it's just like, her grasp on the modern culture.
So, the article I read about this, which is in the New Yorker, it was called The Diary of a Made-Up Teen. The article says, like, verisimilitude is a difficult thing to gauge, especially when it concerns the inherent histrionics of adolescence and the genuine extremes of addiction and trauma. But even if Sparks' books were indeed based in part on real teenagers, how she arrived at the rest remains a mystery. So, yeah, it's like teenagers are like really dramatic, so it's really easy to write these really dramatic stories from the point of view of teenagers. Another quote from that article that I think is really funny, which is like kind of the last thing I have to say about this, is someone said, as a few ex-Mormons have pointed out, Sparks was not the first Mormon to publish a text ostensibly based on an original source that the rest of the world did not get to see. Which is very funny, because that is what the Book of Mormon is.
That's from downtown right there.
Right. A pretty good roast on Mormons. Which I will say, I feel like I've been very harsh to Mormons in this episode. Not all Mormons. There are nice Mormons.
Yeah.
It's just a very interesting, kind of anomalous religion and culture around it that is hard for the rest of the world to understand. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. It is strange. I was very hard on Mormons. I may have talked. My friend David, his backyard over the fence was a Mormon church parking lot, and they just got tons of pipes and beer bottles thrown over that shit, like little homemade weed bongs and shit into there. So I'm sorry, guys, but yeah, no, it is strange for an outsider to crack. It's one of those things where it's like, I have some friends who are Mormon or who grew up Mormon. Wonderful people. Families are great. Families are way more stable and sound than my own.
There are
for sure.
There are chill ones. I'll say that.
Yeah.
There are chill ones, and there are also ones that are like very not cool and fucked up.
when they just as with anything, when they gang up and they start, getting in the voting booth and they start, dabbling their toe in politics, that's when I don't like them. That's
or
when
when they
it's
start fucking jerking off about Satan worshiping teens. It's like, settle down, man. Maybe don't be so repressed and you won't be so weird about this stuff. But good luck.
Yeah. It was like my friend, there was one of those denim skirt to the floor families was in a Sears one time, and my friend said that he worked at Sears and he was there working. He said the son disappeared and they were looking for him and they found him in a clothing gondola, like a clothing rack, like in the middle of it, how like kids can fit in there, and he was holding a bra and jerking off.
Yes. That's the thing. That, Go Ask Alice is like the Mormon housewife equivalent of that to me. It's the same impulse where it's like, if you just were a little bit more normal about this stuff and let people jerk off normally, they wouldn't have to invent all this stuff. It's kind of like our last Patreon episode, which you should all listen to, where it's if you don't let people just express themselves sexually in a normal way, they're gonna be really weird about it.
Yeah, for sure. We've been talking a lot about repressed sexuality and Satanism in the face of religion here. On Lie, Cheat, and Steal this week. Man, well, damn, that's I'm gonna say, I don't know if we're at the worth it point yet, but worth it. It sucks. I don't agree with it, but she seemed to make a very comfortable living off of it for a very long time. Yeah, it's totally worth it.
She had a very big happy family and was rich and lived a long time, and maybe convince some kids not to do drugs. I'm not gonna say it's bad to convince kids not to do drugs. I think that's probably decent. That's an okay thing to do, but
do it the right way. I remember specifically being a kid in the late 80s, early 90s, and that was big when anti-drug, just say no, all that shit.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't until not 8 or 9 until I really even knew what the fuck drugs were or why people would take them. I was just always told, don't take drugs. If somebody ever hands you drugs, you tell them no. I specifically remember my dad's friend telling me that, which that's what your dad's friend's supposed to do. And I was 5 or 6. If somebody tries to give you drugs, you say no.
Right.
And in my head, I was what are these? I had no clue what drugs were. I was like, what are you talking about? I had no. It was like a MacGuffin in my head. I had no clue what a fucking drug even was.
I feel like I didn't know what a drug was, and I especially didn't understand what a drug dealer was. I feel like I thought a drug dealer was a Grim Reaper, a shadowy figure, you know what I mean? Who would force you to take drugs, which is the opposite of their business model. Very strange. Dude.
There was a thing in the 80s where I remember one time I was watching a show and a person was breaking a light bulb. And somebody was and now that I look back, they were breaking the light bulb to use it to smoke drugs.
Yeah.
But the way it was explained to me, to my kid brain, they're about to do drugs.
There's drugs in the light bulb.
There's drugs are in the light bulbs. And I was just what the fuck is going on in this world? So I guess if you're gonna educate kids about drugs, be open and be honest. Talk about it. Don't use metaphors. Don't use scare tactics or stories, because it's not gonna. The end result is gonna be good. You might get a year or two where they're oh, I can't take drugs because a demon will crawl out of my ass. But eventually they're going to Google that and they're going to be that's not true.
Right.
And then who knows? Now they're rogue.
Right.
Now you don't know what they're going to do or how they're going to respond.
When their friend takes drugs and a demon doesn't crawl out of their ass, they're oh, I guess this is fine then.
Yeah, it sounds like he got some bad drugs. He got ripped off. There should be a Satan crawling out of your butthole at this moment.
Well, that's Go Ask Alice and Beatrice Sparks. You can check out that book and that article if you would like to hear more. But that's our story today. We think it's worth it. So
do it, man. Yeah, if you can drain some money out of it's an under-catered to demographic is Christian readers. Yeah, they're voracious. They always want more. So man. Well, thank you so much for telling us about that today, Kath. Let's see. I don't know when this episode's gonna be out. You got anything coming up?
If if you look at my Twitter, Kath Barbadoro, I post all my dates on there. I also have another podcast called What a Time to Be Alive. It's about funny news stories. We do it every week, and it's very fun, so check that out.
Yeah, same thing with me. I'm on Twitter as @PeasyTexas. That's PeezyYTX. Also, the podcast itself is on Twitter @LCS Podcast. And like I said, we do have a Patreon. 2 more episodes a month, access to our back catalog and our Discord, and that is patreon.com/lie, cheat, and steal. And if you check out my socials, I'm going to be all over the South from like September to October. I'm doing like pretty much every big city out there. Call it the Grits and Gravy Tour. It's going to be fun. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. But when you're out there, be safe, be smart, have fun, but above all, don't get caught.
Don't get caught. See you next time.
Bye.